Welcome back here at Goldberg. Today we're going to be talking about my experience with Fundrise as an investing platform, what I think and do I recommend it. My initial exposure to Fundrise came through the blog Financial Samurai, and I don't know if he gets commissions by sponsoring them or they sponsor him, vice versa. Nevertheless, he made the argument that the REIT focused on the heartland of America was a good bet because as these blue states become very costly, tech companies are saying, hey, why don't we move over to the Midwest where you have these bottomed out communities, real estate's very cheap, and we eliminate quite a great deal of overhead and taxation. This is liable to accelerate, especially as remote work has become more acceptable and frankly more possible with current technology trends. So it is something to consider. If you look at Fundrise, they have a number of different investing plans. At the core level, of course, having been there a while, they offered me an in on one of their IPOs, and I did buy some shares. I don't know what's going to happen with that. But you see here their primary investing plans. Supplemental income, you want mainly those dividend checks consistently, but overall you're going to get less of a return. Balanced investing, more towards the middle. Long-term growth, again, over time you're going to really be benefiting, but you'll have less of the regular checks. All right. So what exactly is Fundrise? Well, traditionally we have REITs called real estate investment trusts, where instead of you buying the actual physical property and managing it, you're buying a share in a bunch of properties. And normally with REITs you get a higher than average dividend. You might also see some appreciation in the share price. It all depends. What these companies, which are more recent, are doing is saying, hey, let's make this on a much larger scale or have our own REITs, and you can buy into them and make it an integral part of your investing and retirement plan. It can work. There's pluses and minuses. It is important, however, to recognize, and this is something that I'm going to really be hammering home in the upcoming ebook called The Immortal Investor that'll be released shortly. You can do well with the investment choices you make, but if you're not paying attention to taxes, it's tricky. Now this is very difficult because if you want to retire early, most of the tax shelters, you can't take it out when you're 40, or you have to wait till 59 and a half. So that's the stuff that we really have discussions over in the book. But the reason I bring it up with Fundrise is that traditionally people would say stocks that pay big dividends, or if they have very large growth, or REITs, of course, which have quite fat dividends, you should be putting them in your IRA, so you're not going to have to pay taxes on those dividends. Even if you reinvest dividends in a taxable account, you're still going to have to pay taxes on them. That's the argument of, don't basically add more to your overall income and have to pay Uncle Sam for the pleasure. This is where, of course, it gets tricky because Fundrise at the base level, it's a taxable account. So when I did taxes last year, even though I hadn't had the funds much time at all, I had a bunch of these different little forms I had to fill out for the dividends. They don't do a consolidated one, which is kind of annoying, but it's probably something to do with the IRS parameters. At any rate, you are going to pay taxes on it. So keep that in mind. Supplemental income, I have less than 10 grand in it so far. Over the year, I think I was making $230 in dividends, which isn't bad, but you're going to pay taxes on those dividends. All right. Fundrise does, of course, offer an IRA, but it's not really that appealing. So let's take a look here. For those of you who don't know, a Roth IRA is the one where you've already paid taxes on it. You put it inside. You don't pay any taxes on gains, on dividends within that particular account, and there's no penalty as long as you don't take it out until you're a little bit older. So that's considered the more ideal model, but the downside with it, of course, is that you don't have access as liberally, and there's a cap. I think it's currently $6,000, might be going up to $6,500. So fees, and this will be just if you're using Fundrise. You have the 0.85% annual asset management fee and then the 0.15 annual investment advisory fees. That comes to 1%, which, I've always preached stick around 0.08% or less, which you'll see with Vanguard and others. I think I've got one fund that's 0.03%. This is pretty high as a fee. Now you might think, well, that's not anything. Don't take this too much to heart. They do say 1% fee could potentially cost you $590,000. This is probably focused around you having like a 40-year account. That's your primary investment account. Fundrise might not necessarily be, 70% of your portfolio, but still it is pricey. Don't assume, oh, it's just 1%, it's nothing. You have to calculate that. And that's why I put in the ebook that I'll be releasing, there's actually a link to a calculator you can use, how to understand those fees a little bit better, which I've actually written blog posts on as well, just so that you guys know. But it's not just that. Their IRA is a partnership with Millennium Trust Company, and you also have to pay them $125 a year for an IRA. This is in a time where a lot of places don't charge you any fees for an IRA. So it's for that, on that basis, I'm even considering myself maybe not using Fundrise as much, or perhaps shutting it down and just buying REITs in my Roth IRA. Because, paying extra money, I'm not in their particular IRA, but even Fundrise's fees are kind of steep. And you can take a look here for comparison. 1%, Crowd Street, 0.5 to 2.5%, so it's going to depend on the fund. Diversity Fund, which I don't know much about, they supposedly have no fees. Here you've got Equity Multiple, 0.5 to 1.5%, 1% to 2.5%, and Rich Uncle, which is another that gets advertised, a crack ton, 3%. And then Realty Mogul is another 1 to 1.25%. So one of the biggest advantages with a Fundrise, of course, is that you only need $500 to open an account. Same thing with Rich Uncle, but of course they're much more expensive. So those fees do matter. If you buy regular REITs on the market, typically you're not paying fees to hold them. And so that's going to be a big separation overall. So this is one it's very popular. I do own this, just for disclosure. Realty Income Corporation. I think I bought it a couple months ago. I'm up like 15 or 16%. It hovers back and forth. But at least right here, you don't see a fee, because typically it'll say expense ratio, whatever. But you've got dividend rate 2.81 or 4.61%. So if this is in your IRA, you might have appreciation of the stock value. So let's say you bought it when it was at the real low. I don't know if that's the exact low. Here's March. Let's just say you bought it around 47. Well, now you've made a pretty considerable amount. But that dividend is additional, and you can either reinvest it into the stock, or you could just be taking it in your IRA and not paying taxes. Whereas under Fundrise, if it's a taxable account, you are going to be paying taxes on it. And if you try to use their IRA, you'll avoid taxes, but you still have those fees to both companies. So it's a good concept. I'm not saying I'm necessarily going to close my account. It's worth checking out, but I would just really caution people. I think they need to be more competitive. They're getting folks in with the idea. It's kind of cool, the Heartland E-REIT and all that. But the fees are a little bit too steep, at least as far as I'm concerned. So any questions, other topics you want to see considered, drop them below.